Chapter 49, Liu Anmei. Liu Anmei set her training robe on fire. Again, she didn't mean to. That was the thing. She'd just been thinking too hard. About breath rhythm, spell pressure, and that ridiculously stiff shoulder roll the Li girl insisted on doing in every finishing stance. The mana around her fingers surged the way it always did when she was annoyed. And then, poof, flames again. She sighed and patted it out lazily with one hand, singeing her palm in the process. The burn healed halfway before she even finished standing up. "Morning," she said aloud, to no one in particular. Time to ruin something beautiful. Lotus Peak wasn't as peaceful as people claimed. Sure, the birds were quiet. The air was pure. The elder monks all spoke in koans so vague you could hear yourself growing wiser while failing to understand them. But under all that, pressure. It hummed in the stone, in the training yards, in the way the other disciples bowed a little too quickly when Anmei passed them, because they knew who she was. One of the four. Not just beautiful untouchable. Liu Anmei, the laughing flame of Emberflower Pavilion, dual champion of 7 provinces, owner of 9 broken engagement tokens, 8 stolen, 1 thrown. Try to marry her? In your dreams. Proud, unpredictable, and entirely uninterested in etiquette. She stretched her arms behind her back, letting her joints pop. She watched her own chest bounce. They did so beautifully. Damn right they did. Mana swirled through her in slow, lazy waves, warm, thick, golden orange. Her mana had always had a flame attribute. She didn't know why. She wondered sometimes if her personality was shaped by the fire. Or maybe her personality shaped her mana. She didn't know, but she had always been in the flame. Her mana moved with the kind of heat that made metal sweat. It didn't need direction. It didn't need summoning. It was there. Always ready like, her very breath had an activation sequence built into her intent. Others had to cast. She just had to think and command. Her fans sat folded at her waist. She didn't need them today. Her intent was too low to require activation. And besides, she wasn't hunting. She was bored. She hated it when it was boring. So boring. Down in the courtyard, the Ice Queen was at it again. Week after week, it was the same damn thing. Lee Vivian, all straight lines and cold perfection, like someone had forged her from sculpted snowfall. She moved through her sword form, what was that one called? Piercing edge? Like she'd been born for it. Relentless. Practiced. Perfect. And Anmei hated it, and not because it was bad. Because it was so good she wanted to throw something at it just to see what would happen. She turned away from the crane of the Lee house and hopped onto the edge of a low training wall, balancing effortlessly on her toes, and let her mana flare just enough to warm the air around her shoulders and empower her body. Then she called down, voice bright and impossible to ignore. "Are you ever going to relax, Icicle?" Vivian didn't flinch, but in a blurring move, she threw an icicle at Anmei. She dropped from the wall with a somersault, rolled to her feet, and bounced once on her heels. Sparks trailed her steps, and she moved down the mountain. She waved to a few stunned disciples who immediately scurried out of her way. "Back in 5, ladies," she said cheerfully. She touched the shawl of one of the girls. "Oh, I love that." She was pretty sure none of them had even dared look her in the eyes. Gods, it was exhausting being famous and awesome. Definitely awesome. 2 hours later, after a brief joy brawl with the training dummy, it exploded, technically not her fault. She wandered toward the center pavilion, where meals were usually taken after morning sessions. And there they were, Vivian, sitting alone at one end of the long bench table, back straight, blade polished and laid beside her like a guard dog, and a little further down Yume-shan, the poet of Earth. A spirit cultivator, impossibly elegant, rumored to have shattered a man's cultivation just by writing his name in calligraphy. Anmei grinned. She was her kind of girl. She grabbed some dumplings and walked straight over, dropped onto the bench with zero grace, and threw her arms across the table between them. "Well, isn't this a deliciously awkward silence? Maybe you guys should make out." Neither of them looked at her. Hey, oh, how fun. The silence at the table was exquisite. A bit tense, a bit uncomfortable, all awkward. But still, perfectly arranged like a garden someone had raked exactly once and then forbidden anyone from walking across. Vivian Lee sat at one end, posture erect, hands folded in that way that said, "This conversation is beneath me, but go ahead and try anyway." Her blade rested beside her bowl like a declaration. Yume-shan sat at the other, quiet as a stone that had decided to wait out the next 3 centuries. Her robes were draped in dusty gold and moss green. She didn't eat. She didn't blink. She just breathed like an old tree-deep, slow, permanent. You see what she did there? Wood and stone, a spirit cultivator. Good lord, she was clever. Anmei could see the ambient mana swirling toward Yume-shan. And then there was Liu Anmei, sitting squarely in the middle, slurping dumplings like they were divine truth wrapped in dough. She chewed thoughtfully. You know, she said, mouthful, if I didn't know better, I'd say we were avoiding each other on purpose. Neither woman responded. Anmei popped another dumpling into her mouth and pointed her chopsticks at Mei-shan. You've said maybe 3 words in the 2 weeks I've been here. Are you meditating or judging me? Mei-shan didn't look up. Yes. Vivian snorted barely. Anmei perked up. Oh, was that emotion? Did the glacier crack? Vivian looked up slowly. I'm trying to enjoy my silence. And I'm trying to enjoy your company, Anmei replied. Let's call it a draw. Mei-shan raised an eyebrow. I bet you're a joy at parties. A few disciples sat at the far tables, eating in quick, quiet gulps like they'd wandered into a room with wild predators and couldn't figure out how to back out without getting eaten. Anmei watched them for a moment, then leaned toward Mei-shan. You notice no one else sits within 4 tables of us? That's because they respect the sanctity of lunch, Mei-shan murmured. Vivian didn't even look. Or they're terrified. Anmei leaned back with a grin. Good. They should be. For a moment, the 3 of them just sat. One fiery and loud, one cold and sharp, one calm and ancient. 3 of the most feared and admired cultivators of their generation sharing dumplings and unspoken burdens in the middle of a silent mountain. Anmei tapped the table. So, we're here. Together. No wars. No husbands or boyfriends. No overbearing masters breathing down our necks. Why aren't we talking about anything that matters? Vivian sipped her tea. Because some of us came here to train. And some of us, Anmei said, came here to breathe. She glanced at Mei-shan. You? Mei-shan finally looked up. I came to listen. Anmei blinked. Oh, she speaks in riddles and hints. I love that. She turned her attention back to Vivian. So, Ethan Joe. Vivian didn't flinch, but her grip on the teacup changed. Slightly. You're married to him. That's public record. Is it public record that he might be smarter than all of us combined? Vivian set her cup down with care. Anmei beamed. Just asking. For context. Vivian exhaled through her nose. He's brilliant. He's irritating. We have an arrangement. He doesn't chase. He respects you, Mei-shan said softly. Your boundaries. That is rare for political marriages. Vivian didn't respond. Anmei sat back, watching the 2 of them in turn. Then she said, in a voice too light to be casual, I'm confused. Do you want him to chase you? Vivian didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. The moment passed. Outside, wind rustled through the cherry trees lining the outer path. A pair of acolytes darted past the window, whispering too fast for Anmei to catch the words. She stretched, reached for more dumplings, and said, You know, it's funny. They call us the 4 great beauties, like we're flowers in a royal garden. She looked between them, but all I see at this table are weapons. Mei-shan said nothing. Vivian didn't disagree. Anmei grinned. Good. Since you're being all stoic and boring, take a look at this. Chapter 50. Vivian. The projection orb glowed faintly where it floated above the table. Vivian leaned forward, fingers grazing the rim of her teacup as Ethan's image came into focus. Ethan was seated on a lecture stage at the Imperial Academy alone against a half-ring of lecturers, faculty heads, and spellcraft specialists. An amphitheater full of prestige pomposity and posers. Vivian blinked. Ethan. Ethan was on the screen. What was he doing there? At the front of the room sat Jin Rong, a blowhard from the second-tier Rong family who thought they were the god's gift to academia. Ever polite, ever shining, leading the discussion with oiled charm. Vivian barely noticed him or the half-dozen intellectuals who sat opposite her husband. She was watching Ethan. It was strange to see him, even from a projection. He looked good relaxed, but not particularly engaged, like he was tired. She wondered if he was eating well. There was color in his cheeks. Maybe he wasn't sleeping well? His eyes looked a bit tired. Also, did he look a little bigger? More defined? Was he actively training? That would be good for him. It was strange how he could be so disengaged and somehow have the whole damn crowd lean forward when he spoke. She wondered how she would feel once she saw him, and what she felt was annoyed. Weeks without a message, no notes, no coded updates through the house channels. It was like his wife didn't even exist to him. She thought about messaging him, but he was the man. Her husband. He should be checking in on her, not the other way around. The whole damn thing pissed her off. She'd told herself it didn't matter. That he was studying, experimenting, building whatever strange project he needed to feel useful. But in the depths of the night, when she let her thoughts wander, she found herself irritated that her husband had not contacted her once since she left. What kind of husband does that? Ethan said something, and the projection orb panned to the audience, who were laughing and whispering to each other behind fans. What the hell? Why were there so many women there? Who was that girl in the front? The blonde with the big eyes? Was she waving at him? She was cute too. Damn it. People quieted when he spoke. It was measured, confident, impossibly calm. It wasn't just clarity in speech, but the command of dictation. He wasn't challenging their ideas. He was replacing them. And they were listening. Vivian's thumb traced a slow circle against the teacup's rim. Her expression remained unreadable. Composed. But something in her chest tightened. He'd changed, or maybe, she thought bitterly, he'd always been like this. And she had simply never looked closely enough. The room on the projection rippled with energy. The panelists pressed in with questions. Jinrong tried to reassert control, question him, embarrassment. He tried to embarrass her husband? The nerve of this man. Ethan didn't flinch. He spoke, and the room held its breath. Vivian set the teacup down with more force than necessary. The sharp clink of porcelain on lacquered wood cut through the silence. Maishin and Anmei looked up but said nothing. Vivian reached for her message crystal. The pulse of mana flared softly as she activated the link. Vivian. May. There was a symposium at the Imperial Academy. Looks recent within the last few days. I want the full recording. There was a brief pause before May's voice returned, filtered through the crystal. May. Understood, my lady. May I ask why? Vivian. My husband was there. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. Vivian. I want every word said in that room. Cross-reference the transcript names, affiliations, reactions. Watch who moves. Watch who doesn't. Get it to my quarters within the hour. May. At once, my lady. Vivian ended the link and set the crystal down gently, far more gently than the teacup. Her expression gave nothing away. But the room felt colder than it had a moment before. Vivian refocused on the projection along with Meishan and Anmei. He had been quiet, not contacting her. The few updates she got from her mother didn't even mention Ethan. She'd thought that no news meant nothing was happening. She closed her eyes for a moment, then whispered to herself, barely audible, "What have you been up to?" The consensus, Jinrong was saying in his endlessly polite, endlessly smug voice, is that Maginette can be stabilized with high-standard casters and refined calibration techniques. Vivian narrowed her eyes. That argument again. Then the projection shifted. There was additional speaking that Vivian didn't hear. Ethan didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. But it didn't matter because when he spoke, the room leaned forward anyway. Let's break that down, he said calmly. Domain-level spellcraft is brilliant in the hands of one master, but it doesn't scale across an empire. It's fine for combat, for personal execution, for momentary control. It's useless when you try to make it universal. And using a master doesn't solve the underlying issue. It could make it worse. The camera angle cut to the crowd, a dozen panelists shifting in their seats. A master's intent is stronger, not weaker. That's how they execute high-level spells and techniques. In theory, yes, their control should be better, but their mana is more powerful and their intent more concentrated. If even a fraction of that leaks into the shared stream. On the screen, Ethan shrugged. The whole thing goes tits up. A moment of silence followed. Vivian could practically feel the ripple through the projection. There was more jaw-jackying. Unimportant people saying unimportant things. Ethan's tone didn't change and started listening again when her husband spoke. If you want to fix the real problem, you need a complete redesign of the apparatus housing the Maginette. Build it like a machine, not a conduit. Use it to develop an instruction-based language. Then create a task execution system. Something that can interpret and repeat commands with consistency. Once you have that, Reproducible results become trivial. Iteration becomes inevitable. The projection caught Jinrong leaning forward, his smile tightening. A complete overhaul, he said. Housing, language, instruction, one that separates intent from structure and execution. It's an inelegant theory, Lord Zhou, but surely you realize all spellcasting relies on intent. Even children know that. Without intent to bridge mana and outcome, there is no effect. You're trying to strip the soul from a system built on instinct. Ethan met his gaze. I'm trying to stop that instinct from burning everything down and build something better. A foundation that gives more control, more consistency, and more function than you've ever dared to imagine. Vivian leaned forward slightly. That line. Then came the moment. Ethan turned to the projection crystal above them, where a failed relay sigil still flickered, and said, You want to imagine it that works. That's reliable. That can accomplish the tasks you envision. Then you need a foundation built on protocols. Instructions that are easier to maintain. Easier to debug. A base that can be layered, adapted, and trusted to do exactly what it's told. This, he said, his voice steady as the room held its breath, is how you stop treating spellcraft like ritual and start treating it like a system language, one anyone can learn. Anmei let out a slow whistle beside her. Your husband just told the Academy their sacred invention was pig shit wrapped in arrogance and polished with their own faces. Vivian didn't answer. Machen leaned forward, voice hushed. He wants to rebuild the entire magical backbone of the Empire. Not patch it, replace it. Bold. Have to love a bold man. The image froze on Ethan's final expression. Calm, head tilted, like he wasn't sure why everyone looked so surprised. Vivian stared at the projection, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of her cup. Ethan had never talked like this before. Bold, direct, unapologetic. He continued to surprise her. Ethan Zhou had always been known for being quiet, observant, brilliant, yes, but inward-facing, reserved, not someone who challenged consensus, let alone rewrote it. This was something else. Architecture. He wasn't dismantling the system for shock value. He was diagramming a new one mid-conversation and daring the room to imagine it could work. Anmei tilted her head. Good Lord, he is sexy. Vivian and Machen looked at her. Anmei shrugged. What is he like in bed? If you don't want him, Lady Ice, can I have him? Vivian stood abruptly. I'm heading back to my room. May brought her a recording of the projection. Vivian watched the discussion 3 more times. She didn't understand what her husband was talking about. She didn't like that she didn't understand it. Her crystal charm sat stationary against her wrist. She looked down. No message. Of course not. Why would he write? It had been weeks. That's it. Enough is enough. Vivian tapped her charm, but not to her husband, who was too busy to write her. She wrote to someone else. Vivian. Nathan, it's your sister. There was a suspicious delay. Then, Nathan. Oh no, my scary older sister. What did I do? Vivian blinked. The boy was too casual for someone raised in a martial household. Vivian. Nothing. I have a question. Nathan. Okay, but do I need to sit down for it? Because I have never gotten a message from you before. I thought this device was defective for brother-to-sister communication. I should write an apology letter to the makers of my crystal. She didn't dignify that with a response. Vivian. How is your brother-in-law adjusting? Nathan. Oh, big brother Ethan? Vivian. Yes. Nathan. He's kinda scary, not even kidding, it's so freaking awesome. Vivian paused. Vivian. Explain. Nathan. He's been training like mad in the Lee sword style. Father allowed a full tutorial. He has me Master Shen helping him. He's pretty much crushing it. Your husband is kind of a badass. Vivian stared at the glowing text. That made no sense. Vivian. Wait, they gave him full access? Not just the first movements like the branch families? Nathan. Yeah. One guy protested. Tried to say he wasn't worthy. Can you believe that? My brother-in-law not worthy? The bastard. I wanted to stab him, but brother-in-law wouldn't let me. They honor dueled, mind you. This was only a week after brother-in-law started training. It's like the guy has a cheat code or something. Anyway, brother-in-law dropped him in 2 moves. With basic footwork. With some mana this time. His control is coming along great. And he is picking up the technique so fast that it makes me jealous. Vivian. That isn't possible. Nathan. It's true. Through brother-in-law complains about not understanding or something. I don't know. He is hard to follow most of the time. Anyway, I have to ask my darling sister. What the hell did you do to this man? Because he is training and learning like a guy possessed. Did you promise the guy a child if he mastered the sword or something? That sounds like something you'd do. Vivian's fingers tightened slightly around her wrist. She could feel the veins popping in her temple. She made a mental note to beat her brother to death when she saw him next. As for Ethan, she didn't know. The Ethan she remembered had raw power so pure it bordered on divine, but he had 0 control over his mana. But this? He was practicing Lee swordsmanship, her family's style, the most precise and mana-intensive sword school in the Empire. It was also the most difficult, and the most dangerous, and he was learning, and thriving while doing it. Vivian sat in her room, softly lit, quiet. No attendants, just shelves of binding scrolls and a single lacquered desk. She pulled a fresh strip of silk-threaded parchment and smoothed it flat. Her calligraphy pen hovered for a second. Then she began to write. The 10 movements, the 10 techniques, her interpretation of the foundational Lee sword work, passed only to blood heirs and martial-paired spouses. It wasn't romantic, not overtly. But in a world like theirs, offering someone this knowledge was damn near making out in the cloak closet. She reviewed each character, edited a bit. At the bottom, she stamped it not with the House Lee seal, but her personal crest. Then she tapped the message crystal and opened a private thread. Vivian, I hear you've begun training. These may help. 10 movements, 10 techniques. Use them. Or don't. Lady Lai. She hit send, then turned the charm face down, and didn't move. Just waiting, quietly, without reason. The jerk better write her back.
Chapter 51, Daniel. The notification flicked across his charm with a muted chime. Daniel didn't look up at first. Still focused on his grip alignment, adjusting the hilt of Chinglin's silence to reduce wrist torque. The blade had a weight to it that didn't match its mass-like. It carried expectation. He exhaled, sheathed it, and checked the message. Vivian, I hear you've begun training. 10 movements. 10 techniques. Use them. Or don't. Lady Lee. Daniel blinked. No greeting. No preamble. No insult. Lady Lee, what is this, a state announcement? The first time he'd heard from his wife in how long, and not even a hello. Just a scroll attachment. He opened it with a flick of his finger. 10 columns unfurled in clean silver script calligraphy. Annotated in her hand. Technical. Precise. Almost surgical. He read the first line aloud, almost involuntarily. Iron vein. If your stance breaks, your spirit will follow. Basic movement form. 4 steps. Forward, back, side, side. Teaches structural integrity, static pressure handling, and directional balance. Rooted in breath, anchoring, and grounding footwork. He raised an eyebrow. Thanks for the encouragement, he muttered, then sat down on the practice bench. Crystals still glowing faintly in his palm. He scrolled. The 10 movements of the Lai sword. Foundational martial disciplines used for shaping body, breath, and basic blade rhythm strikes. This is my take on them. Nathan tells me you're doing well. We should spar when I get back. We can have a bout, and the loser will owe the winner a favor. Iron vein. If your stance breaks, your spirit will follow. Basic movement form. 4 steps. Forward, back, side, side. Teaches structural integrity, static pressure handling, and directional balance. Rooted in breath, anchoring, and grounding footwork. Piercing edge. 1 cut, 1 heartbeat. The Lee family's signature dueling stance and first strike. A forward slash. Minimalist, efficient, and relentlessly aggressive. Designed to strike through single opponent gaps using tempo, micro adjustments, and a mana lash from the wrist down the blade to add weight and edge. Falling sky. Let the heavens fall first. You'll still be standing. A redirection movement designed to absorb and deflect high-force techniques like piercing edge and mana projectiles. Primarily defensive, taught for facing long-range or superior blade cultivators. Wind cross. To move unseen is to survive. Mobility form built on off-angle slashes and evasive, mana-empowered footwork. Incorporates sudden stance changes to disorient heavier or slower opponents. Note, this will take a lot of practice. Make sure your mana flow, intent, and activation are advanced level before you attempt. Mirror Fang. What strikes you dies by reflection. Counter movement form. Reacts in real time to enemy technique, converting their attack into a mirrored fatal strike. Demands precision and perfect read timing. 7 steps of silence. The fight ends before they know it began. Entry form. A blindingly fast blitz technique using optimized footwork tempo to break defensive lines or approach multiple enemies through shifting rhythms. Bloodline Oath. Your spirit is not your own, it belongs to your house. A forward lunging slash that begins with a grounded left step advance, followed by a rising diagonal cut from hip to shoulder. The motion channels internal mana through the chest and shoulders, reinforcing the cut with more force than most strikes. When executed correctly, the strike leaves behind a faint, echoing slash. Blade Lineage. Every strike echoes your ancestors. A slow, deliberate kata that begins with a diagonal draw from the hip, followed by a spiraling overhead sweep and controlled return to guard. Each motion is synchronized with breath and heartbeat, cycling mana through the arms, blade, and spine in a continuous loop. Used to attune the cultivator's rhythm to a specific weapon, especially heirloom blades or spirit-forged artifacts. When performed correctly, the movement leaves a harmonic trail of mana behind each cut, reinforcing the bond between wielder and lineage. Best practiced alone, in silence, at dawn. Crushing Horizon. One strike to shatter the tide, power form. Wide, mana-reinforced sweeps meant to collapse shields, disrupt energy flow, and decimate groups or armored targets. Often used by frontline commanders. The Empty Hold. There is no fear, no doubt, only execution. A forbidden movement. Erases emotion, channeling only void sword intent and chaos mana. Lethal and irreversible. Suppressed after past abuses during the Eastern campaigns. Very dangerous, can cut through just about anything, but can backlash and destroy the user. The 10 techniques of the Lysword. Vivian's creations. Battlefield executable strikes derived from the movements above. Crescent Step Cleave. Movement 2, Piercing Edge. A diagonal slash timed with a mana flicker that severs energy channels mid-cast. Used to interrupt spellcasting. Sundering Point, Movement V, Blade Lineage. A mana compression thrust that punches through heavy armor and spiritual barriers, can actually create a projectile of sword force. Ghost Veil Disarm, Movement Fear, Windcross. A fluid wrist roll maneuver that redirects weapon arcs while rotating behind the opponent. Ideal for disarm plus counter grapple. Falcon Cross, Movement 3, Falling Sky. A feint heavy combo. Draws a high guard, then shifts to a low pivot cut from the opposite shoulder, baiting misread counters. Spiral Wound Return, Movement 7, 7 Steps of Silence. If a slash misses, this technique spirals the blade back on a tight angle, often catching the enemy mid-recovery. Vaulting Blade Turn, Movements 4 and 9. A dynamic leap turn maneuver used to reposition and recover vertical dominance, while keeping the blade active. Shadow Twin Execution, Movement 6, Mirror Fang. A tempo-matching feint followed by an actual strike delayed by 1 heartbeat, landing as the enemy finishes their counter. Breathlock Slash, Movement V, Blade Lineage. Tuned to enemy breath rhythm. A delayed ultra-precise strike that disrupts cultivation cycles and internal mana flow. Fangs of the Lee, Special Combo. A 3-strike pattern using family-locked footwork. Slash, feint, drop lunge. Must be taught directly, cannot be learned from scrolls. Blade Echo Recall, linked to the Empty Hold. Leaves a memory scar of a strike in space for a short period of time. If the opponent steps into that line again, the blade's energy manifests a second cut. Daniel read it all once. Then again. He'd seen all of this in one form or another, but nowhere had he seen the movements, techniques, and consideration broken down and explained so cleanly. No wonder she was the heir apparent. He didn't rush to try them. He didn't stand or pose or draw diagrams. He just sat there and let the silence build. She gave me her interpretation of her air scroll, he murmured. Ethan stirred inside his head. Do you understand what she just did? I think so. She opened the door. She's waiting to see if you can walk through it. Daniel exhaled through his nose and stood, slowly, with intention. He moved to the center of the training circle. He took up the stance and aligned his posture. Iron Vein. Feet flat, knees slightly bent, spine aligned, shoulders low, breath steady. Interesting. There was no dramatic surge of mana, no spell array to unnaturally empower the body. Just Daniel standing still in the shape of readiness. He held the form. He took one breath, moving it with his mana. Then another. He shifted. Forward. Back. Side. Side. 4 steps. Measured. Rooted. Clean. He repeated the sequence again. This time slower, tracking balance across his arches, testing how the tension in his spine reacted to small adjustments in breath, weight, and mana movement. The pattern felt simple, but simplicity, he realized, was a lie told by people who didn't understand the work. Iron Vein wasn't about movement. It was the movement that forced the breath. It was about structure. It was the test that came before all others. Can your body follow a command? Can your breath obey timing? Can your thoughts stay silent long enough to listen? He finished the 4th repetition and stopped. His body remembered it now. Not perfectly, but enough. A spark of confidence touched his core. A small, quiet sensation of something beginning to settle into place. Ethan spoke, voice softer. You're a bastard, you know that? The first time I worked with the Joe family footwork, I almost broke my foot. Daniel smiled faintly. No, you would. A flicker of amusement, then silence again. He turned back toward the bench and picked up the scroll Vivian had sent. He enlarged the projection. Looked again at the glyphs she'd written beside each movement, crisp strokes, slightly slanted her personal hand. This was a gift. A really valuable one, Ethan said. If I didn't know any better, I'd say she likes you. Daniel rolled his eyes. Nothing more distracting than a pretty face, my friend. Daniel sat down and started copying everything that Vivian had sent him. He considered each of the movements and techniques, taking his own notes and marking his own thoughts as he compared them to hers. Damn, she was really good. This woman was just impressive. He got up and tested the Iron Vein again. 1 form down, 9 to go. And somewhere far above him, in the still silence of a mountain estate, he hoped she felt it when he stepped into the rhythm, because she was holding open the door, and he was going to walk through it.